April 20th was just another day at school for me. I mean, it started out normal. I was just going to classes and just a typical day. My 5th hour class is my choir class, which is where I was that day at 11:20 when everything started.
I had 2 children in Columbine. I had Rachel, who was a junior, and Craig, who was a sophomore. And so that day, we did a lot of play acting and kidding, and one of the things that we did a lot of was role reversal, where they would take on the attitude of the parent, and I would be the child or the teenager. And one of the last things Rachel said to me was, Mom, I'm just not going to be able to take care of you anymore. And, you know, not having any idea that that really was going to be the actual truth.
My day started out just the typical job of a homemaker. I was just cleaning the house.
It was really strange because we heard noises coming from the cafeteria, and you don't normally hear noise coming into a choir room because it's kind of a soundproof room. But we still didn't think anything. We still weren't that worried. And then we saw kids running past the door. Then everyone was a little bit tense. Weren't sure what was going on. And then a kid walked in and said, "There's a guy with a gun." About half the students in the classroom left immediately. They ran out the door, and the other half of us that stayed in there, we kind of got down on our knees. You know, we were kind of just trying to figure out what was going on. I remember I immediately grabbed a girl a couple rows behind me, and I started to pray with her because we still weren't sure what was going on. We heard all this noise, we saw screaming, but you really don't know what's going on. Your mind hasn't come to understand it yet. And the gunshots, you could hear their gunshots were getting closer at that point.
We all got under the desk, and then they just started coming in the library and opening fire and shooting off bombs.
The 2 guys were around, and they were shooting people left and right.
Screaming after they'd shoot up something, they'd go, "Woo!" Just a pleasure for them. That's all it is.
So many people.
I made it to the top of the stairs. More people were just coming up, and so I turned around and went the other way with the rest of the kids, and I ended up in a science office. The 2 teachers in the room that were with us huddled over us, and one of them being a Christian and one of them not being a Christian, he started praying that if a life had to be taken or that if someone had to get shot, that it would be him or one of the teachers, so that these kids could still have a chance to know Jesus and know Christ, which just made me start crying because I almost just felt how lucky I really was, you know, to have known him and know him before I was in a situation like this.
You could almost sense, you know, the good and the evil in there just kind of butting heads. You'd never in your wildest dreams think about anything like that, like for real, you know, and it was real.
It was the scariest thing I've ever seen. You could hear policemen just coming from all directions. I mean, ambulances everywhere, fire trucks. There were like 7 helicopters in the sky, and they had a tank there from the National Guard. The SWAT team was there.
Finally, when they were, you know, within 5-10 feet of us, right in on the table right behind us, and I looked back and I could see both their faces of them sit. They had set some of their stuff down on the table, and for some reason just decided that they needed to go reload on ammo, and walked out the main entrance to the library, and that's when I, just got up and I yelled, everybody get out. Everybody that got out at the time when the rush of people got out of the library, there was no one else. All the people that were in there, except for Patrick Ireland, there was no one else alive in there at the time. And he got out, minutes later out of the window.
We went outside and the SWAT was there and they took us out, and basically they just told us to run for our lives. We were searched on the fence first, and they searched us because we were all treated as suspects because they weren't sure, what was going on.
None of us knew how big it was, We weren't sure how big it was, and the first indication that this was something completely serious was when we ran out of the school. One of the first things we saw was Rachel Scott, and she was just dead. One of the girls that got killed was just lying there dead as we ran past. And it just it was almost like shock. You couldn't believe what you just run past. And you knew she wasn't alive because they weren't trying to help her or anything. She was obviously dead. I remember seeing Rachel Scott's mother coming into the elementary school, and I had just seen Rachel Scott dead coming out of the school, and I saw her coming in saying, have you seen Rachel? Has anyone seen my daughter Rachel? And my heart just sunk because I knew that I'd seen Rachel dead, and I wasn't about to be the one to tell her,
Meanwhile, Craig, who escaped out of the library, called me on somebody's cellular phone out in the parking lots, and he said, Mom, I got out, Mom. And he said, I'm praying with other students who still have brothers or sisters somewhere in the school, and I'm praying with them. He said, but Mom, I can't find Rachel. And he said, I'm really worried about Rachel.
Or when I heard about the Columbine incident, I was at church here, and we were about 2 miles from Columbine. So I jumped in my truck and I ran down there. And then about 30 minutes after I was there, a couple of kids from our youth group came running out, and they said, you're not going to believe this. Isaiah, who was the Afro-American student, he said he was shot. He was shot 9 times. I heard another girl run out and say that she had heard a young lady ask the question, do you believe in God? She said yes, and the young girl said, and they killed her. Those are the first 2 stories that I heard when I went over there.
I think what happened to Eric and Dylan that did all the shooting started as something really small. A comment somebody may have given to them in passing about them being different or not fitting in, something small. But that grew, and they didn't let that out in any way. So it just grew inside, and it grew inside, and they became more angry and more vengeful towards these people that they started thinking, oh gosh, what if I could just get rid of those people?
It's like playing a video game, that video game the boys played called Doom. They played that so much, that it's integrated into their emotions and how they think and how they do. And maybe to them this whole thing was play acting. The problem is there's no reset button on Columbine, April the 20th.
The boys in Littleton were obsessed with violent video games, in particular the game Doom. Doom is used by the United States Marine Corps as a tactical training device. These boys took Doom and designed scenarios that were structured like their neighborhood, and I'm told by the Denver Post reporter, they actually made a Doom scenario that was their school. And then they turned off the ability of the people you killed to fire back. They put themselves in what's called the God mode, And they went into the game and they rehearsed the act of going through their school and gunning down the people in that school. In Taber, Canada, there was a copycat crime to Littleton. There was a boy who was obsessed with the fame that the kids in Littleton got. But the boy had not played the violent video games, and he had not seen the violent movies. He had not been desensitized to human death and suffering. So when he shot his first victim, he went on to begin to wound another, and all of a sudden he stopped. He was stunned with the real blood, the real suffering, the real horror. And he was frozen, as any human being should be. But the boys in Littleton had something he didn't. They had played and played and played the video games. They had the conditioned response to kill, kill, kill. And they had watched the horrendously violent movies and been desensitized to human death and suffering, so they were able to blow one little kid's face off after another, and never pause, never hesitate, never do anything but laugh and mock and cheer as they do.
Maybe their music made them, you know, a little more upset, or maybe video games said, oh, this is how you can kill someone, but that wasn't the real problem. The real problem is they had, I think, they had been so hurt in their heart. And if we look at all these things on the outside that these guys did or were involved in, and never look at what was going on inside of them, all the pain, you never get anywhere. Because I think with Eric and Dylan, it's very easy to say, well, they had this and that and this and that, and that was all wrong, and never take any responsibility and say, well, maybe we never treated them the way we should have treated them.
I had to come to terms with what happened, and I realized that if I were to not forgive, if you keep the hate inside your heart against Eric and Dylan, it's going to be no different than the hate they had against everyone else. Hate is hate, you know. They hated people enough to go crazy on us, and I just can't let that brew. And I know that if you don't forgive people, the bitterness sits inside you, and it steams and it steams, and finally you just let it out, and who knows how it's going to come out. And I know that if you forgive and give it over to God, then He'll make everything new. And He did. He really did.